What happens when two comedy legends sit across from each other and the cameras are rolling, but underneath the surface, years of buried resentment are about to explode? Tonight we're diving into the most shocking late-night television moment that almost never made it to air, a confrontation so intense that it left one host storming off his own show and the other banned from ever returning. The stage was set for what should have been a routine guest appearance. Conan O'Brien, the towering redhead with decades of late-night experience, walked onto Jimmy Kimmel's set with his trademark awkward charm, waving to the audience as the band played him in. But from the moment he settled into that guest chair, something felt different. The usual pre-interview banter that flows so naturally between comedy veterans was missing, replaced by an undercurrent of tension that even the studio audience could sense. "So, Conan," Jimmy began, his voice carrying just a hint of something sharper than his usual tone, "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for years." Conan's eyebrows shot up in that exaggerated way that had made him famous, but his smile seemed forced. "Oh boy, here we go. Should I be worried?" "You tell me," Jimmy replied, leaning back in his chair with arms crossed. "Remember when you hosted The Tonight Show? That whole situation with NBC?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity interview they had expected. Conan's posture stiffened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Jimmy, that was over a decade ago. I thought we were here to talk about my podcast and maybe do some silly bits." We are," Jimmy said, waving his hand dismissively. "But I just think it's interesting how you painted yourself as this victim of network politics, when really you knew exactly what you were doing." Conan blinked slowly, processing what he had just heard. "I'm sorry. What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it outright." Jimmy's voice grew louder, more aggressive. "You manipulated that entire situation to make yourself look like the good guy while Jay Leno got dragged through the mud." The studio fell silent except for the uncomfortable shuffling of feet and nervous coughs from the audience. Conan's famous quick wit seemed momentarily stunned into silence. "Jimmy, I genuinely don't know where this is coming from," Conan said, his voice steady but with an edge creeping in. "Are you seriously bringing up ancient history to attack me on your own show?" "Ancient history?" Jimmy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been dining out on that sob story for years. Poor Conan, screwed over by the big bad network. Meanwhile, Jay Leno, a comedy legend, gets treated like garbage because you couldn't handle not being number one." Conan's jaw tightened. "Handle not being number one? Jimmy, I was literally given The Tonight Show, did my job for 7 months, and then got pushed out because of ratings that were sabotaged by NBC's own scheduling decisions. I think I handled it pretty well, considering." "Oh, please," Jimmy rolled his eyes dramatically. "You act like you're some comedy purist, but you knew exactly what buttons to press with the media. You played the victim card better than anyone." "The victim card?" Conan's voice rose slightly, his famous calm beginning to crack. "I lost my dream job and handled it with more grace than most people would have. What victim card are you talking about?" Jimmy leaned forward, his expression growing more intense. "The whole wounded artist routine. The farewell speech where you told everyone not to be cynical. Come on, Conan, that was performance art designed to make you look noble while everyone else looked like corporate villains." "That farewell speech was genuine," Conan shot back, his pale complexion reddening. "I meant every word of it, because I didn't want people to become cynical about the business we both love." "Right, and coincidentally it made you look like a saint while Jay looked like the bad guy who stole your job." "Jay didn't steal my job, Jimmy. NBC gave him my job back after they realized their transition plan was a disaster. But you know what? I never blamed Jay for that. I blamed the network executives who created that mess." Jimmy scoffed loudly. "Oh, how convenient. St. Conan rises above it all while everyone else gets their hands dirty. What is wrong with you tonight?" Conan asked, genuinely bewildered. Why are you doing this? Because I'm tired of the act, Jimmy said, his voice growing more heated. I'm tired of everyone treating you like you're this comedy god who never puts a foot wrong. You're just as ambitious and calculating as the rest of us, but you've convinced everyone that you're somehow different. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people looking toward the exits. This was clearly not what anyone had expected from a late-night talk show appearance. Jimmy, I came here as your friend, Conan said, his voice quiet but firm. I've known you for years. We've supported each other through this crazy business. I don't understand why you're attacking me like this. Friend? Jimmy laughed bitterly. When was the last time you called me? When was the last time we actually talked outside of some industry event where we had to pretend to be buddies for the cameras? Conan paused, clearly taken aback by the personal turn the conversation had taken. We both have busy schedules, Jimmy. That doesn't mean… Exactly. My point, Jimmy interrupted. We're not friends. We're colleagues who smile and wave at each other because that's what's expected. But I'm done pretending. So you decided to ambush me on live television instead of having a private conversation like an adult? Conan's voice was rising now, his famous composure finally cracking. Adult conversation? Jimmy's voice dripped with sarcasm. Like the adult conversation you had with NBC when you threatened to quit if they moved your show back 30 minutes? Real mature, Conan. Conan's eyes widened in disbelief. Are you seriously criticizing me for standing up for my show? They wanted to push The Tonight Show to midnight and call it The Tonight Show. That's not The Tonight Show, Jimmy. That's what we used to call late night. And there it is, Jimmy said, pointing accusingly. Your ego couldn't handle sharing the spotlight with Jay, even for a few months while things got sorted out. My ego? Conan's voice cracked with incredulity. Jimmy, they promised me The Tonight Show for 5 years. I gave up my show, moved my family and my entire staff across the country, and when the ratings weren't immediately perfect, they wanted to break their promise. How is standing up to that about ego? Jimmy leaned back with a smirk that made several audience members visibly cringe. Because you knew exactly what would happen if you played hardball. You knew the media would eat it up. You knew comedy fans would rally around you, and you knew it would make you more famous than you'd ever been. More famous? Conan's laugh was harsh and bitter. Jimmy, I lost the most prestigious job in late-night television. I was unemployed for months. My staff, people who had worked with me for years, were out of work because of corporate politics. You think I orchestrated that for fame? I think you're smarter than you pretend to be, Jimmy said coldly. And I think you knew that martyrdom would serve you better in the long run than fighting for a compromised version of The Tonight Show. The studio audience was now completely silent, some covering their mouths in shock. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television into something genuinely ugly. You know what, Jimmy? Conan said, his voice quiet but seething with controlled anger. Even if you believed all of that garbage you just said, why would you choose to say it here now on television, in front of all these people who came to be entertained? Because I'm tired of the lies, Jimmy shot back. I'm tired of everyone in this business pretending that you're some kind of comedy saint who never plays the game like the rest of us. What lies, Jimmy? What specifically have I lied about? Jimmy's expression grew more aggressive, leaning forward in his chair. The lie that you didn't want any of this to happen. The lie that you were just an innocent victim. The lie that you handled everything with such grace and dignity. I did handle it with grace and dignity, Conan replied firmly. I could have trashed NBC publicly. I could have attacked Jay personally. I could have made it much uglier than it was. Instead, I made jokes and tried to keep things light even while my career was falling apart. Oh, the jokes, Jimmy said with mock appreciation. The perfect little comedy bits about the whole situation. Brilliant PR move, really. Make fun of your own misery so everyone thinks you're handling it so well. Conan stared at him for a long moment. Those weren't PR moves, Jimmy. That's how I cope with things. That's what comedians do. We find humor in horrible situations because it's the only way to get through them without going insane. Right. And it just happened to make you look incredible while everyone else involved looked like monsters. Everyone else involved were monsters, Conan said flatly. NBC executives who lied to me, who made promises they had no intention of keeping, who were willing to destroy 2 shows rather than admit they made a mistake. I didn't make them look bad, Jimmy. They were bad. Jimmy's face reddened. And Jay? Was Jay a monster too? I never said Jay was a monster. I said the situation was wrong, not Jay personally. But you know what is monstrous? Ambushing a colleague on live television because you've been harboring some weird resentment for over a decade. Weird resentment? Jimmy's voice rose to almost a shout. You want to know what my resentment is about? It's about watching everyone worship you for doing exactly what any of us would have done in that situation. But somehow you're the only one who gets praised for it. Any of us would have done what exactly? Conan demanded. Stood up to network. Executives? Refused to let them destroy the integrity of a show? Protected my staff? Which part of that do you have a problem with? The part where you convinced everyone that you were the only one with integrity in the whole situation, Jimmy snapped. Like the rest of us are just corporate sellouts who would have rolled over and taken whatever scraps the network threw at us. Conan's expression shifted from anger to something approaching pity. Jimmy, is this really about me? Or is this about choices you've made in your own career that you're not comfortable with? The question hit like a physical blow. Jimmy's face went white, then red, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Don't you dare, he said through gritted teeth. Don't you dare turn this around and make it about my psychology or my insecurities. I'm not trying to hurt you, Conan said, his voice softening slightly. But I genuinely don't understand why you're so angry about decisions I made that had nothing to do with you. They had everything to do with me, Jimmy exploded. Every time someone talks about integrity in late night, they point to you. Every time someone talks about standing up to network pressure, they point to you. You've become the gold standard for how a host should behave, and the rest of us just look like sellouts by comparison. Jimmy, that's not my fault. I didn't ask to become anyone's gold standard. I just tried to handle an impossible situation as best I could. By making the rest of us look bad in the process. How did I make you look bad? When have I ever criticized you or any other host? When have I ever claimed to be better than anyone else in this business? Jimmy was breathing heavily now, his composure completely shattered. You don't have to say it outright. It's implied in every interview you give, every speech you make, every time you talk about that whole situation with that wounded dignity act. It's not an act, Conan said firmly. And frankly, Jimmy, the fact that you think basic human decency and professionalism is some kind of performance says more about you than it does about me. The words hung in the air like a slap. Jimmy's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, humiliation, before settling on something cold and calculating. Basic human decency? Jimmy's voice was dangerously quiet now. You want to talk about decency? Let's talk about how you've spent years subtly undermining every other late-night host while pretending to be above the fray. That's completely untrue, Conan said, his own voice rising. When have I ever undermined anyone? I've been supportive of everyone in this business, including you. Supportive? Jimmy laughed harshly. Is that what you call those little comments? In interviews about how some hosts rely too heavily on viral videos and social media stunts instead of focusing on real comedy. Conan looked genuinely confused. I've never said anything like that about you specifically. You didn't have to say it specifically. Everyone knew who you meant. The host who built his show around YouTube clips and celebrity pranks. The host who doesn't write his own material like the pure comedy genius Conan O'Brien. Jimmy, I have never ever criticized your show or your approach to comedy. If you're hearing criticism in general comments about the industry, That's your own insecurity. Talking. My insecurity? Jimmy's voice cracked with fury. You sit there in your ivory tower with your Harvard education and your Simpsons writing credits, looking down on those of us who had to claw our way up through different paths. I'm not looking down on anyone, Conan said, his patience finally wearing thin. But you know what? I'm starting to look down on this pathetic display you're putting on right now. The audience gasped audibly. Even the camera operators seemed to shift uncomfortably behind their equipment. Jimmy's eyes narrowed to slits. There it is. The real Conan O'Brien. The arrogant, condescending elitist who thinks he's better than everyone else. I think I'm better than this, Conan gestured around the studio. Whatever this is supposed to be. I think anyone with basic professionalism would be better than ambushing a guest with years of petty grievances. Petty? Jimmy stood up abruptly, towering over Conan, who remained seated. Petty is watching you get praised for years while the rest of us get treated like we're just lucky to have jobs. Conan slowly stood as well, his height advantage immediately apparent. You know what's actually petty, Jimmy? Being so insecure about your own success that you need to tear down a colleague on national television. My success? Jimmy's voice was getting shrill now. Let's talk about success. Let's talk about ratings. Let's talk about who's actually winning in late night right now. If ratings are how you measure success, then congratulations, Conan said icily. You win. You've successfully turned your show into exactly the kind of celebrity gossip and viral video compilation that I would never want to host. The studio went dead silent. Even the production crew seemed frozen in place. Jimmy's face turned almost purple with rage. Get out. What? I said get out. Get off my stage. Get out of my studio and don't ever come back. Conan stared at him in disbelief. You're kicking me off your show? I'm kicking you out of my building. Security, escort. Mr. O'Brien out. For a moment nobody moved. The security guards looked confused, unsure whether this was part of some elaborate bit, or if their boss had actually lost his mind on live television. You're serious, Conan said, not a question but a statement of amazement. You're actually throwing me out. Dead serious. I don't want to see your sanctimonious face for another second. Conan looked around the studio at the shocked faces of the audience, at the bewildered expressions of the crew, at the cameras still rolling and capturing every moment of this career-defining meltdown. You know what, Jimmy? Conan said, his voice calm again, but with steel underneath. I came here tonight thinking I was visiting a friend. I was wrong. I was visiting someone who's been eaten alive by jealousy and resentment, someone who's forgotten what this business is supposed to be about. Save the speech, Jimmy snarled. Security now. I don't need security, Conan said, straightening his tie with deliberate calm. I can find my own way out. Unlike some people, I still have my dignity intact. He turned toward the audience, many of whom were now standing and looking uncertain about whether to applaud or flee. Ladies and gentlemen, Conan said with a slight bow, I apologize that your evening of entertainment turned into this unfortunate display. You deserved better. Don't apologize to my audience, Jimmy screamed, all pretense of television professionalism completely abandoned. They're here to see me, not you. Conan paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time. Jimmy, I genuinely hope you get the help you need. This level of anger and resentment isn't healthy for anyone. Get out, Jimmy repeated, his voice breaking slightly. Conan walked off the stage with his head held high, leaving behind a studio, full of stunned silence and one host whose career-defining moment had just become his most humiliating public breakdown. The cameras kept rolling as Jimmy stood alone on his stage, breathing heavily, seemingly unaware that his meltdown was being broadcast live to millions of viewers who had just witnessed the most shocking moment in late-night television history. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before someone finally had the presence of mind to cut to commercial. But the damage was already done. The king of late night had just destroyed himself on live television, and everyone had seen it happen.